Well, welcome back. We're talking about relations between China and Latin America. Let's get back to our panel right now. And Ambassador, I want to start this segment with you by taking a look and a listen to what the Chilean foreign minister said at the China-CELAC conference. Let's watch.
Reconocemos la diversidad que existe entre nuestros países.
We recognize the diversity that exists between our countries, especially between the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. But we agree that the problems and challenges of today can only be solved by working together. No isolated country, no matter how strong, can solve them. Multilateral collaboration is needed.
So that was a not-so-veiled criticism of the United States there, wasn't it?
I think it was. I value very much what Victor was saying about the Chinese vision of what's going on in the region. I think that the feeling in the region is that there is some sort of geopolitical dispute going on, with maybe the U.S. Having a very stark contrast in the way it approaches the region, being very attacking the region, being very aggressive in many ways to Latin America, while China is proposing a different type of relation. Right. I think there are high expectations on the possibility of strengthening a relation that is based truly on mutual respect, on economic win-win grounds, on mutual benefit, on mutual trust. That's still something that needs to be fully developed. But Latin America needs very much this type of relation. And it also needs, I think, something that I hope the CELAC meeting accomplished, which is going back to strengthening the regional bodies. Because we need, as a region, to be able to establish dialogue and bilateral relations with the US, with China, with Europe, in unity. And unfortunately, in the last 2 years, the region has been going through a period in which internal integration is really weakened. So I think that to better develop our relation with China, we also need to strengthen our own integration as a region. We need to do our own homework to be in a better position to better integrate and take full advantage of this opportunity.
Ines, certainly the world is changing, political dynamics around the world changing as well. Let's look at Mexico. You worked in Mexico for several years. When we look at what's going on right now, the renegotiation of NAFTA, amid these constant threats by President Trump to pull out of the deal altogether, if one is an economic planner sitting in Mexico City, do you look to China then?
I think you have to look to opportunities wherever they are present. And I think that's part of what came out from this very important meeting in Santiago is that commitment to explore a closer relationship, explore a deepening of the dialogue, and finding opportunities in trade, investment, innovation, science, and technology. And I think that's what Mexico and other countries are doing by exploring a closer relationship with China, definitely. And that's part of the project of strengthening growth, diversifying exports, and diversifying also export partners.
Mark, I know you've written a lot about this, the United States relationship with Latin America. How big a priority is Latin America for the United States? The Secretary of State has yet to visit the region. The Chinese Foreign Minister, Wang Yi, has already made his second visit there.
Yes. Well, it's always the case that Latin America politically in the U.S. is not a big priority because it doesn't have electoral consequences so much, except in Florida sometimes. But for the most part, presidents are not worried that much. Obama and Bush, for example, had really almost the same foreign policy towards Latin America. And that was mainly because they didn't pay that much attention to it. But that's not to say the U.S. doesn't. There are 17 intelligence agencies. There's the Pentagon, there's the State Department, there's the Foreign Policy Committees of Congress, and there's the National Security Council. And there are people in each of these bodies that's very interested and intervening in Latin America all the time. Even in Brazil, where we just had news of what's happening to Lula, they supported that impeachment process that led to the further decapitation of the Workers' Party in Brazil. Every left government you can find almost in South America had some kind of trouble with the United States. It's just the president themselves doesn't pay as much attention because very few people vote on Latin American issues in the U.S.
Right, Ambassador, what has been your experience? I mean, you've represented Argentina here in the United States. When you look at the broad relationship between the United States and Latin America, is Latin America not getting, let's say, the right kind of attention from the United States?
Well, we've seen some important changes during the Trump administration in relation with Latin America, and I think that a change that has not been in the right direction certainly is the change in going backward in terms of the relation with Cuba. The defreezing of the bilateral relation between the US and Cuba that President Obama worked for and announced was very well celebrated and valued all across Latin America. And it was seen as a way of really trying to refresh the relation on more equal grounds. Unfortunately, this has been stopped, so there's a lot of doubts about what's going on in relation with that. And also the situation with the migrant community here in the United States. I think it's a big issue of concern for Latin Americans all across the continent, and also here Hispanic community in the United States. So I think those are some of the big challenges. In terms of the trade relation, I must say that we have seen in the case of Argentina a very significant change, because the main export of Argentina to the United States, which used to be until very recently the biofuels, the biodiesel, which was 25% of Argentine exports to the US, unfortunately has been recently blocked by a trade measure that was established by the United States. So there's a lot of concern in Argentina of how this is going to impact our trade relations. So I think there are many issues that really need attention and need to be worked out.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, and going back, I was thinking, going back to the China, Latin America and Caribbean relationship and the topics that were discussed in the meeting in Santiago, Chile, I think that what is very good is that the agenda is quite broad. And the agenda, they agreed on a work plan in 8 topics, and all those topics are crucial for growth for Latin America and the Caribbean. It's infrastructure, it's science and technology, etc. And those are the topics that really will probably make a difference in the years to come for growth in the region.
Right, as you say, the agenda was very broad. Victor, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, he talked of a new era of cooperation between China and Latin America in things like corruption, an anti-corruption drive, anti-drugs, cyber crimes. How big an issue is this for China, and what kind of progress can we see on that?
Well, we all know that China, over the past 5 years in particular, has been engaged with this very intensive anti-corruption campaign, which has resulted in cleaner and more transparent government and bringing corrupt officials to punishment and restoring confidence among the people in the capability of the ruling party as well as the government in dealing with these corruption cases. This is very important for China for its long-term sustainable development. For Latin American countries, we all know for various political reasons and historical reasons, there are very specific problems in Latin America. As you mentioned, drug problems, trafficking, for example, and corruption, and also sometimes lower efficiency of government and lack of sufficient amount of accountability. And I think from the Chinese perspective, we need to work together. We need to treat each other as an equal, and we can share our own experiences with each other so that the other parties, for example, in Latin America and Caribbean countries, can look at China for China's successes as well as failures, for China's strengths as well as weaknesses. And then we can exchange views as to how some of these experiences and lessons we have accumulated here in China can be shared and absorbed by our friends and partners in Latin American countries. And I think this is important because I think only by improving accountability and transparency of the government can the development, whatever level it is, become more sustainable and bring stability in the societies and try to narrow the gap of income for the people in general will be very important pillars for sustained development in these countries.
Ines, I've got about a minute left, and let's look at the Belt and Road Initiative. That is China's big signature foreign policy initiative, which impacts, various parts of the world. How has it impacted Latin America?
Well, for Latin America and the Caribbean, I think we see with very good eyes. I mean, a growing China, Asia, Europe, etc., will bring more demand for our products, and also the promise of greater connectivity, etc., was very well received by the ministers at the statement that it was made in Santiago, Chile.
And we have seen that mainly in the development of infrastructure.
Exactly, in connectivity and infrastructure. And that is crucial. I mean, Latin America and the Caribbean has a tremendous gap in terms of infrastructure. We have calculated that in order, we need to invest over 6% of GDP per year in order to satisfy demand. So that is something extremely important.
Right. Mark, finally, I mean, there is some tension when we look at the Chinese relationship with Latin America. The U.S. Undersecretary for International Affairs, David Malpass, wrote a letter which was obtained by the Bloomberg news agency. He wrote a letter to the Inter-American Development Bank cautioning that China's economic policies in Latin America could prove harmful to the very countries that that bank tries to help.
Yeah, I don't think that's likely. I mean, first of all, they benefit from having another source of investment, and a very large one. Investment and lending, and even, aid in some cases, actual development aid. And so I think that, there's obviously a competition between the U.S. and China. We don't have to hide that. I mean, China, Victor mentioned that China is going to be the largest consumer market in the world.
Right.
China already, on a purchasing power parity basis, which is for a lot of measures, a better measure of gross domestic product, is already 20% bigger than the United States. And in 12 years, it's going to be twice as big as the United States. And they're going to have to get used to the idea that they can't tell China what to do.
We are going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us.